In this video, we look at multiplying and dividing fractions. But first, let's take another look at reducing fractions. Because often, when it comes to multiplying or dividing fractions, we call reducing fractions by another name. We call it cancellation. So if I have 15 over 25, okay, if I just want to look at this reduced, then I could divide the top and the bottom by 5. And then I get 15 divided by 5 is 3. 25 divided by 5 is 5. If you look at this from a cancellation standpoint, I can rewrite 15 as 3 times 5. And I can rewrite 25 as 5 times 5. And now I quote cancel common factors. A 5 is in common here, and a 5 is in common here. This is the same thing as I did up here when I divided by 5. So now, since those canceled, and when things cancel, they leave a 1, we have 3/5. So either way, when you reduce, or you call it cancellation, it's the same thing. So let's look at our first example. I have 3/8 times 2/5. And the nice thing about this is when you're multiplying or dividing fractions, you do not have to get a common denominator. Yay! We do not have to have a common denominator. If you get one, that's okay. But it's not necessary. What you do is you'll multiply the numerators. So in this case, we'd have 3 times 2. So multiply the numerators, 3 times 2. Then we'll multiply the denominators. And we get 8 times 5. We could go ahead and multiply first, or we could go ahead and cancel any common factors. And I notice that there's a 2 in the numerator of this fraction and an 8 in the denominator of this fraction. So I can rewrite the 8 as 2 times 4 times 5. And my 2's will cancel, just like we saw in the beginning introduction. So now what I'm left with is 3 over 20. And that won't reduce any further. For our next example, let's look at multiplying two mixed numbers. Definitely here it is much easier to change these to improper fractions first. So I'll rewrite 1 and a ninth is 9 times 1 plus 1, which will be 10 over 9, times 4 times 2, which is 8, plus 3, which would be 11, over 4. And now I simply do the same thing. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. I also notice here that there happens to be a 10, which is divisible by 2 in the numerator, and a 4, which also is divisible by 2 in the denominator. So I'm going to rewrite that 10 as 2 times 5 times 11. And then I'll rewrite the 9 the 4 as 2 times 2. This 2 cancels this 2, and I'm left with 55 over 18. Now I know this won't reduce because I know that now 5 and 11 have no common factors with 9 and 2. So I'm finished. When looking at division, let's first look at what it means to divide. What is the definition of division? Well, division means to multiply by the reciprocal. So what we will do is to write the division as a multiplication and then multiply as usual. So for my first example in division, I've written up here 2/3 divided by 1/9. So 2/3 divided by means is the equivalent as saying that 2/3 is multiplied by the reciprocal of 1/9, which is just flipping it over. That's what to reciprocate means, switch numerator and denominator. Now I have a multiplication problem. Those are easy. So I have 2 times 9 over 3 times 1. But I notice that I have a 3 in the bottom and a 9 in the top, so I'm going to rewrite that 9 as 3 times 3. 3 times 1. Cancel one of the 3's, and I'm left with 6 over 1. But 6 over 1, anything divided by 1, is itself, so that's just 6. Our second example involves some mixed numbers. And just like we did before, the first step I'm going to do is change these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So 5 and 3/11 would be 11 times 5, which is 55, plus 3, which would be 58 over 11, divided by, now I'll change this to an improper fraction. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13, over 3. And now that I have improper fractions, I'll rewrite this as a multiplication problem. So 58 over 11 divided by 13/3 is 58 over 11 times the reciprocal of 13/3, which is 3 over 13. Now we proceed with the multiplication. 58 times 3 over 11 times 13. So now, excuse me, we multiply 58 times 3, and that's 174. And 11 times 13 would be 143. I didn't see any common factors here. 11 and 13 are both prime. 3 is prime. 58 is not prime, but 11 will not go into 58. And neither will 13. So this is reduced as far as we can.